Have you heard of golden handcuffs? It's the idea that a job does a bunch of stuff to try and keep you super comfortable so you don't leave. Or at least that's what I think it is. We're about to learn in this video. Let's check it out.
A job because walking away feels impossible. Now, have you ever felt that way because you were paid too much? Sounds weird because you know what feels really good? Making lots of money. But you know what else can feel soul-sucking and stagnating? Making a lot of money. Absolute first world problems, I know, but the trap of making too much money and therefore staying in situations that might be ruining your mental and physical health is a very real problem. It's a problem you might be experiencing now, or maybe you will in the future. The term for this phenomenon is golden handcuffs. The official definition refers to the financial incentives a company may give their employees so they hopefully stay at the company longer. One industry that is notorious
I mean, one of the biggest, outside of golden handcuffs, kind of normal, is just healthcare. People stick with their jobs just so they can have healthcare, since it's so incredibly expensive in the United States.
for this is big law. If you've ever seen the show Suits, you know that the lawyers in the show, even the junior associates, are making pretty big bucks for their age. But that comes with a huge cost. Long hours, demanding bosses, and a schedule that never truly ends.
So what do you need?
2 days off.
No problem. Feel free to take Saturday and Sunday off.
He meant in addition to the weekend.
In addition,
As I've heard it from big law creators, you don't get to have excuses or personal days. That is why we pay you the big bucks.
You are being paid that much money because you are expected to be responsive. And I mean responsive like at all times. You should be responding to most of your emails within a
So it really depends on who you are, right? Because if I were able to get like some great trading position, right? And understand in my position I have to build a track record before I can do that with a firm, then I would be happy to suffer, as people would see it, with the amount of hours that I'd be putting in trading around the clock. So I think it depends on who you are, whether or not you want your life to be nothing but work. For you, if you were working your perfect job, your most ideal job, the thing that you absolutely want to do, would you be willing to like give away a ton of your personal life and your enjoyment time and your free time in order to keep that job or have that job? Let me know. Let me know.
few minutes, if not at the hour.
So why stay? Well, obviously because you're making a lot of money, and if you stick with it long enough, you could be rich, like capital R rich. But there are major risks to the golden handcuffs.
Another thing is, if you were making a crazy amount of money, the only thing that immediately should be a golden handcuff outside of the benefits of the company would be your lifestyle, your living expenses. A lot of people, as we know, when they get more money, they start spending more money. And suddenly, if they lose that money or that source of income, or they start looking at their pockets, they notice, oh, dang, I have the same amount of money as I did before. And it's because most people's cost of living equals out to the amount that they make. And for a lot of people, if you get an opportunity to make a crazy amount of money, that should be the time where you try to spend even less money than you did before, as paradoxical as it sounds. So that you can be absolutely free to do whatever you want in the event that you decide to leave one random day.
Leaves the show entirely. Carell reportedly left to spend more time with family and explore new film opportunities, and he did this despite earning $300,000 an episode. The Office, by the way, is a classic network show with 20+ episode seasons, so that's a lot of moolah to walk away from. Why am I telling you all this? Well, because I think it is a great example of the opportunity costs associated with the golden handcuffs. When you are stuck in a job that pays better than any job you've had before it, walking away is terrifying. For Steve Carell, The Office was by far more money than he'd ever seen. He was in big movies and shows, but not the star. So stepping away from a show that was that popular, that high paying, and with great people, I'm sure there were a lot of people who thought he was crazy. But even for Steve,
I've seen so many people, even at places that I've worked at, who make so much money that they just can't quit. And they can't see themselves making that amount of money anywhere else. And it's true, because the startup phase in a job wouldn't immediately get to them to the point to where they're making the amount of money that they're currently making. So it's kind of a valid fear.
there were opportunity costs. For one, lifestyle. Carell wanted to spend more time with his family, and with packed seasons of The Office, that became difficult. And career-wise, staying at The Office meant saying no to a lot of new film opportunities that came his way. Now, not every leading TV star who walks away from film ends up killing it, but luckily for Carell, that wasn't the case. Taking the leap from The Office Golden Handcuffs gave him the space to explore heavier roles like Foxcatcher, The Big Short, and Beautiful Boy. People are constantly impressed by the acting range that Carell has because he was long known.
The Office ended before The Big Short? I feel like The Big Short is an old movie, right?
For being that goofy, funny guy. But arguably, that range and that body of work was only possible because he made the tough decision to walk away from his golden handcuffs. And look, I get it, Steve Carell is a multi-millionaire celebrity, and everyday people's golden handcuff situations are very different. Obviously, if being on The Office was killing Carell, he probably could have walked away and never worked another day in his life if he wanted to, whereas most people's golden handcuffs can feel especially difficult because you aren't financially free yet. Having that extra money means it's easier to pay the bills and keep your family afloat. The worry can be, I'm making a lot of money right now, what if I never find another job like that again? And I want to be clear, and I'll touch on this again later in the video, but it is not a bad thing to stay at a high-paying job that you don't love. I am certainly not trying to make the case that everyone needs to leave their high-paying jobs to start a passion project or take a sabbatical that they might not be able to afford. But I do think it's important for us to know the trade-offs involved with golden handcuffs so that we can make the most informed decision for ourselves. And the trade-off with golden handcuffs is that you might not be willing to try new things, which can then stagnate your career and lead you to feeling more unfulfilled. And in Steve Carell's case, possibly make even less money in the long run. Sticking with a job that pays well but makes you absolutely miserable might destroy your mental health over time too. It can damage your relationships and lead you to living.
I have a friend right now, won't mention his name or anything, he wouldn't mind me talking anyway. He has a very high-level job in a specific industry, and he gets paid a lot per client. And the problem with him leaving or potentially going to another career or trying to figure something else out is the fact that he has the comfort of knowing he can make XYZ amount with just one client compared to other industries. And that's difficult, right? If you don't like what you're doing as much anymore, or if you'd like to just try something else, or if it just doesn't align with what you desire for your life anymore.
A less physically healthy life than you might want. Those are the obvious trade-offs, but there's another aspect of the golden handcuffs trap that we don't always think about, and that is the lifestyle creep and status obsession that can come with some of those high-paying jobs. For one, just making a lot of money can encourage lifestyle creep. I think a certain amount of lifestyle creep or inflation is great. I mean, money should be a tool that we use to improve our lives, but it can also veer into a bad territory when we're using it simply to keep up with those around us. When people start making a lot of money, they might be even more tempted to splurge on things that they don't really want, but they feel like the culture demands of them. Private school for the kids, the nicest new car, the biggest house on the block. And this pressure can feel even stronger if you are in a status-conscious career. Suits, again, is a great example of this because the suits that they wear in the show are thousands of dollars each. When Mike first joins the law firm, Harvey shames him for $100 suits and tells him he needs to invest in more expensive ones. Yes, Mike is probably making a couple $100,000 a year now, but already $10,000 of it has been spent on his work clothes. This feeds straight into the golden handcuffs trap because as your expenses grow, the income that you need to maintain it also needs to grow. Thus, you become more reliant on your high-paying job, and it no longer becomes a situation where you just don't want to stay at the job. Now it becomes a job that you cannot leave. So what's behind all of this? The fear of never finding a better job, that worrying that you'll never have enough money, or that desire to funnel money into lifestyle creep so that you can flex to others. I think the root of all of it is a scarcity mindset. A scarcity mindset is the belief that resources like money, time, and opportunities are finite and always in short supply. It's the constant fear of losing what you have or never having enough, even when you're doing well financially. With a scarcity mindset, you're less likely to take risks because you're afraid you won't find something better. You also might cling to golden handcuffs, believing that the high salary or the perks are your only chance at stability, even if they come at the expense of your well-being. This mindset also drives lifestyle inflation. When you feel like money is scarce, it's easy to fall into the trap of spending more to prove yourself and to others that you have.
That's so paradoxical. I just can't see that to be the case. If you're truly afraid that you'll lose everything again, you wouldn't be spending as much money as other people, right? I mean, if you were afraid to lose everything, if that is a true fear that you have, then you would be scarce with how you spend your money.
Made it. It becomes a cycle of clinging to what feels safe while sacrificing what could bring long-term fulfillment. The cycle becomes even harder to escape with how we straight up glamorize grind culture. It's not just the Instagram grinding memes, it is the way that we subtly brag to each other about how many hours we put into work or studying last
soft
week.
hands.
How little sleep
Girls
we're
got
getting.
soft
How many
hands.
of our pop culture icons are certified workaholics. Grind culture has us not only glorifying burnout and overwork, but also feeling like every year we should be making more money, and that it's a failure if we ever jump to a job making less than before. Even if that new job is still a great pay that covers all your bills, we can feel disappointed, as if we're regressing in our career and self-worth. That self-worth piece is especially interesting to me because I think it's easy to assume that golden handcuffs is always about money, but I actually think that sometimes we stay in miserable, high-paying jobs because of things like identity and status, not just the paycheck itself. Going back to our suits example, early in the show, Harvey tells Mike that if he wants to leave their law firm, he can go ahead. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something like how Mike could move to a small town in Indiana, practice law there.
I've never been able to watch the show. I don't know. It's just a little too cringy, a little over the top. And the main character, him, he's just not likable enough for me. He's not... I feel like he could have been a little bit more extreme, you know? I don't I'm just
there,
there.
and no one would ever be the wiser that he was a fraud. But Harvey knows that Mike doesn't want that. As Harvey puts it, Mike wants to play in the big leagues, aka he likes the status and identity that comes from being the hotshot lawyer in New York City. We can't underestimate the power of those emotional pools, because it can have us staying in jobs that aren't truly serving us, maybe aren't even paying us as much, but we stay because we tie the job into how we perceive and value ourselves. You become Harvey Specter the lawyer, Olivia Pope the fixer, Meredith Grey the doctor. Those titles give us a sense of identity, but what we should be seeking is what's known as a complex identity. I personally refer to this as diluting your identity, and it's essentially the idea of making your identity more than just one thing. If you see yourself as the highly paid engineer or the best-selling novelist or the YouTube gal, then the second that you start facing bumps in the road, your identity is going to feel like it is caving in on itself. Say you get laid off at the engineering job, or your next novel doesn't.
The question here, though, the question with that is, and I agree with it, but the question is, at what point is it you diluting your identity versus you becoming a jack of all trades, right? Because it sounds awfully a lot like the same thing. And if you have a desire to absolutely be the best at whatever you're doing, and that's your purpose or reason to exist, and you desire nothing more than to achieve that thing, then you associating your identity with that is inevitable, and you becoming emotionally entwined with whether or not you're succeeding in that thing is inevitable. That's kind of how I feel with the foreign exchange markets and trading in general. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think there's a motivation and pressure there that can be unhealthy, but it's also very healthy and very beneficial when it comes to motivating you to try and improve in whatever you're trying to do. If you know that you want to be that one thing, then everything else just will be less satisfying. And any other identities that you try to put in, any other masks that you try to put on, they just won't feel right for you. It just won't feel like a good fit. And because of that, like, I agree. You should be, a Renaissance man, valuable in a lot of different areas, good at a lot of different things, able to switch up, and okay if your main thing or what you really want to do isn't succeeding at any given moment. But that's not to say that it's horrible to put all of your identity into one thing you're trying to accomplish or become. And if that one thing is, the Stanley Cup girl, or it's the nothing. If it's a nothing identity that means absolutely nothing, then go ahead. Cut that off, You need a more complex identity, like she said. But if it's something valuable, something that really means something to you, then pursuing it and making it your identity is kind of what you have to do in order to become great at that thing.
Make the New York Times bestseller list, or your most recent upload gets a lot of hate comments. It's going to feel devastating because you've crafted a fragile one-dimensional identity. But make the identity more complex, add in things like you're also a daughter, a soccer player, a great chef, a dog mom, a weekend slam poet. Now, suddenly, when one part of your life goes through a rough patch, you can lean on the other parts of your identity for a sense of place and value. The golden handcuffs trap makes it easy to slip into this hamster wheel in which we come to rely on the money and the validation a high-paying job gives us. But that hamster wheel might just be holding us back. That being said, I think it's important to recognize here that the grass is greener syndrome is all too real, and reiterate that this is not a video telling people to suddenly leave their jobs. For me, I was at my last company for 4 years, and I will be honest, there were times where I was so frustrated, I was so ready to quit, I was so stressed, but it was also the highest paying job that I'd had in my career, and I knew that that salary was helping me hit my financial goals. And it did. I almost 5 or 6 times my net worth in the 4 years that I was there, which made me in a much more financially secure place. And honestly, I was scared of losing that. I was stuck in golden handcuffs. And while I do think that I could have jumped jobs, I also know that every job would have come with some problem. I would 100% go through seasons of burnout and frustration.
Every job, unless it is your passion project which you succeed at making your thing, will come with major downsides. The grass might be greener in some places, but there will also be patches in that field. Every job.
At those jobs too. Grass is greener syndrome certainly ate at me at times, making me feel like I need to jump and leave this job as soon as possible. But once I stepped back and took a more objective look at the pros and cons, as well as working to enforce more boundaries at work, I realized I was pretty content being in these mini golden handcuffs for those 4 years. I personally do not regret it. I can't tell you whether your golden handcuff situation is the same as mine because everyone's is so different, but here are some ways that you can think about your money and your life that can help with your decision making. For one, get a handle on your financial status. How much do you have? How prepped are you with an emergency fund? And what are your savings goals? If you know your savings goals, you know what jobs out there can get you to that goal. And it might be that your golden handcuffs job isn't necessary for you to hit those goals. 2, remember that money is a tool and that time is our most precious resource in life. There's this great book called Die with Zero that talks about how if you die with a lot more money than you use, that represents time in your life that you basically worked for free. This is why knowing how much you need financially is so important, because you don't want want to
Good
fall into the
concept.
trap of 1 more year syndrome. This is when people refuse to retire or take a break because they just want to squeeze 1 more year of high income out of their careers. The problem being that every year you move the goalpost out 1 more year until whoops, now you're dead. Rich, but dead. 3, work on
That
having
happens a lot.
boundaries at work. I don't believe in
So many people die with full retirements they absolutely will never use. It might or might not go to their predecessors. I mean, their kin, their daughters, their family. That is very common.
the whole find your passion spiel for careers. My thinking on that has been heavily influenced by the book So Good They Can't Ignore You, which I highly recommend checking out if you're trying to think more about your career. Like I said earlier, it's easy to fall into grass is greener syndrome, but it's worth looking at the job you have now to see if there are ways
There's
to
a lot of
make it
syndromes
better.
now,
Maybe you have
girl.
to be stricter with yourself and others that after 5 p.m. you are not checking or responding to emails. You don't let notifications get sent to your phone, and you use every vacation day that you are given every year. And maybe every quarter do an audit of all of your meetings to see which ones can be turned into emails and taken off the calendar. I found taking steps like this has really helped my relationship with work in the past so that I feel less like I'm stuck in the golden handcuffs trap and more like I'm just maintaining a balanced work life with good pay. And lastly, don't forget that it is absolutely okay to stay at a job that is working for your goals and boundaries right now. For some that seems obvious, but I think it's important to mention simply because there can be so much pressure online to quit everything, screw the system.
Stupid pressure to do so. Anyway, good video. I want to touch on the last point that she made. There's this idea that everybody should be an entrepreneur. Oh, quit your 9 to 5. That's the stupidest fucking thing ever. Essentially, everybody does their own thing anywhere. When you commit to a 9 to 5 job, you're committing to be a consultant for whatever business, and they're going to pay you a certain amount based on your value and what you can complete and contribute and accomplish for the company. If you're really, really good, they'll pay you more. If you're really, really good, sometimes they won't pay you more, but then you just go to another company. The idea that everybody on earth absolutely has to be entrepreneurial makes no sense. The vast majority of wealth moving around is as a result of people working for companies. Tim Waltz, for example, he didn't start the company. Not Tim Waltz. Tim Cook, the current CEO of Apple, he didn't start that company. He's a billionaire now. It's called intrapreneurship. It's another way to make tons of money while working for a corporation or adding significant value to it. So if you have a significant skill and it's made a company tons of money, and you know that you aren't getting paid the amount of value that you're worth at that company, then you go to another company, find somebody else who does value that trait that you have, that skill set you have. Anyway, that's all.